Hey everybody, I'd like to do a very quick video on the Faderport 8 by PreSonus. And let me just say right up in front, this is not an all-inclusive how to use the Faderport, and show you all the features. There's a lot of videos on the internet. I might suggest you look at some by Johnny Geib in particular, who's done a whole series on the Faderport and basically does one video per section and goes over the whole thing. But I want to tell you about how I think this is a useful tool to have in your studio, and what I particularly like about the Faderport and the features that I've been using the most and what I like. You can see I've got a little session going here on the screen here using Studio One, and this guy sets up perfectly with Studio One. There's no question about that. It goes in and the program immediately recognizes as an interface, and it's very easy to use. Now, aside from being able to control all your faders, as you can see that I'm doing, it works flawlessly. There's a lot of other features that actually are not on the live mixers now that they have the DAW control that will still make this a handy unit to have. And some features that I like, I don't believe this is on the mixer. You can see where I'm going to go to my transport control, and I find this very handy. Of course, you now have a pause where I can stop and I can go back to the beginning, and I'll go ahead and start it again. And if I want to, I can just go ahead and move it. Watch my timeline here. I just scroll it forward here, and there I am. And a couple other things that are handy, like I say, I'm not going to get into really depth, but you can go ahead and jump around to the different areas. If you're using the Ranger track, or you want to jump to different sections, it will all do that. You notice I've got the selected here. Now I've got a headphone mix up here on the far right, if you look at that, and you can see this will control my headphone mix. And I can set all this to control my headphones that I've got set up, if you look here on this row right on my sends. And then I've got, people ask, can you still use this as a master fader? And yes. Now I've got a small session here to where I've got this all on one bank, but you can scroll through the different banks. You see pushing the bank button, but this is my master. And then of course all my faders for the tracks that I've got playing. And say if you just want a solo, you can of course do things like that. I'm just soloing my keyboards, bring in the drums, and then you can solo clear. And naturally you can do everything with the mute and everything. I'm really finding the transport is very handy. The clear all that I just showed you. The other thing that I like is the zoom control, and I really use this a lot. And of course these keys have two functions just depending on what you're doing. And so if I push the zoom on the bank, I can zoom into my selection, as you can see, and it's zooming around the cursor, or I can use the arrows to go up and down. And I realize you can do all that with the keyboard and such too here. Let me click on the screen. But it's really nice to have this here. I think it's also important, this is just, at least for me, that you set this up with a hand that you're going to be using, and I like using my mouse in my right hand since I'm right-handed, and then I can go ahead and have this all right here, and this really works out perfectly for me. The screens are small, on the small side, but they're very usable, and it can show you where your pan knob is, and like I say, I don't want to get into super depth about what's going on with this, but to show you what I like to use. The transport, I like using this for the zoom here, and then I can go ahead and, when I do have larger tracks in my session, or more tracks in my session, I can flip to the bank and scroll through my banks. If you want this knob as a master, you go ahead and push master. I use this a lot, and this becomes my master as it's set up right now. Since I don't have a lot of tracks on the screen, I can just use that as my master. Then the automation modes, I like to use this very much for my automations, and you can go through the different modes in your automations. Of course, after you set your automation, you go from off into read, but you would start up typically within a write mode. And then after you've written some automation, you can go in the read, and then you have the two choices of how you want to augment what you've already automated with the touch of the latch, depending potentially what you want to do. These are very handy, very handy. Did I say I love the transport just being right here instead of having to click with my mouse? That makes it slick here. So I just roll back a little bit here as I'm doing. And then I set my loop. If I had set a loop area, which I don't have one set, let me just quick draw one on the screen. See, I've got a loop. Now watch, I will engage the loop. And there's my loop. And then of course my click track. So just even being used for some of the most basic features, I'm finding this just very helpful. I can't say enough about it. These faders, they feel good, they work good, and they're very responsive. You can get in and of course adjust the feel of the faders as far as how responsive they are, and make sure you have the latest update, because that worked with the contrast on the little scribble strips. It's a mouthful up there to deal with that. But that's really all I wanted to cover on the Faderport, just to say that these are, if you just don't get into it really deeply, like I say, you can even take your third-party plugins and have all your faders be the controls for the different parameters on the plugin, and of course the PreSonus native plugins are automatically set up. In other words, if I clicked on the compressor, this might be the attack, the release, the threshold, and mix knob or input gain, output gain, whatever, and it's already done for you. But if you've got a favorite plugin that you like to use, which I've got a couple, I like to use the Valhalla reverbs and some of the Boz Lab such items, like their delays and the compressors. I can set this up very easily and control the parameters. But like I say, I'm getting off on a rabbit trail and getting into details. This is a wonderful item. The cost is killer. It did break an arm and a leg to get this. More faders would be nice. Of course, they have the Faderport 16, but the 8 is working out beautifully, just being able to switch between the banks. And I'm being told that those that now have the live mixers, that these are not redundant. If you have the live mixers, if you have your preamps and everything, I would choose this over the mixer for sure, because this really goes into more depth than what kind of control you have on the mixers. And then of course you can go into the different modes to set up for Pro Tools or other programs if you want. It has the Mackie UI or the Pro Tool protocol. And I think I'm going to end it there. I'm kind of dragging things out a little bit, but I appreciate you watching this. And if you have any questions, post them down below, and I try to get back to my questions as quickly as I can. Once this post admittedly gets fairly old, after a couple of months or a year or so, I may not get to all the posts. But please make your comments and give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down whether you like your Faderport. And of course, as always, please remember to subscribe. That really helps me a lot. Take care, guys, and thanks so much.